This is going to be a truly awesome discussion with what I consider the premier sportsbook and the premier sportsbook director in the U.S. landscape currently, from Circa, Matt Metcalf. And this is a valuable discussion for everybody because we're going to touch on a lot of different issues. And I saw an awesome podcast somewhere else within the last week, and I've intentionally avoided any of those same questions. So this should all be different content, and I think it's going to be very rewarding. I'd like to introduce Matt Metcalf, who I've known for ages. We used to bounce around into each other back a decade ago, and I've always known him to be one of the sharpest guys around, working with the sharpest people. And with that being said, how did that final transition from being a bettor lead to Circa, number one, and how were you able to measure the where am I going to make more money? What all that transitional thought process involved? What was that about?
Yeah, so thanks for having me on, Chris and Ron. I really appreciate coming on your guys' relatively new show. I've watched a couple episodes and it's been good. So, the transition, I guess, from bookmaker to bettor back to bookmaker is 20 years long, I guess. I worked at the Westgate from 2004, 2010, and was frustrated mostly by not necessarily the log jam at the top, but the lack of opportunities in Las Vegas for people who wanted to be in the sports betting space. At that time, there were a few big jobs. It was like Caesars, MGM, stations, and those guys were all kind of lifer guys who weren't going anywhere. And, I was landlocked kind of with Jeff Sherman and Ed Salmons over at the Westgate, and, wasn't really entirely happy with the money I was making, was betting sports on the side. So I decided to make that transition just because I kind of hit a wall. I mean, I was only making probably like 38,000 a year, 41,000 a year at that time. And I'd been doing it for 5-6 years. Yeah, it was. So I was running around town betting during that time. And I was actually catching a lot of grief from other sportsbook directors, or, I say other, I wasn't a sportsbook director at the time, but from sportsbook directors who were basically kind of giving me the attitude of like, you're one of us. Why are you betting into our lines and taking our money, which I was really, kind of annoyed by, because I'm like, well, it's easy for you to say that when you're making, 200, 300 a year, and I'm making 38,000 a year. So I need to make money. I put a lot of work into this. This is my stuff. I'm not copying people's plays. So I think I probably got kind of a chip on my shoulder in the late 2000s, running around betting at books who didn't want my action while working in a book. And then, it kind of lined up where I felt like I was in a good enough position where I was making enough money where I could just bet full time and I would make more. So I think that's probably when I first started running into you, Chris. I remember the first time I saw you was probably at Planet Hollywood, waiting in lines there to hit their numbers when they would hang the openers for a variety of things, maybe NFL or something like that.
They were offering 5,000 a game, and they were a half point to a point off on all their numbers, and they knew it.
I mean, to their credit, they were looking to take bets. I can't remember the guy's name over there, Dave something, Stock or something like that, but he was looking to take bets. So yeah, I did that for a few years, and I guess all the way to 2018. But I've always enjoyed taking bets more than placing bets. I just don't like to. I like other people to kind of make those decisions as what they're to bet. I like to make the decision of how much risk I want as a bookmaker, but it really stresses me out week to week, just having to kind of, have my numbers, have my ratings. And it's a good deal of control where I can pick my own games. But at the same time, I just like accumulating risk at scale. And it's a lot less stressful to do that when somebody else is making the bets and you have the plus 110 working for you. So that's always been where I've been most comfortable. So I think I probably came back as a combination of I really, really, really have honed in on what I want to do. And I have this like vision of how the book should treat customers. So that made me want to come back. But then also I was just to a point where I'm like, I just enjoy bookmaking better than I do betting. And so I think it just kind of like ran into each other. And, I met Derek around that time. I was looking for opportunities, and he sounded like he was going to give me a lot of free reign to kind of do what I thought was best. And he has. And so, yeah.
It's still 24/7 though, isn't it?
It's no different. It's the same. And That's the worst part. I think Chris Bennett said this one time in an interview. He was talking about it. He's like, yeah, it's like being a doctor. And I would never say that because it's like feels pretentious saying it, but he's right. That's it. You're just never off the clock. Like you're always on your phone. You know, your wife, your girlfriend is always going to be annoyed that you're like never putting it down, but you have to, if something comes out, you got to text the book and say, hey, drop that win total down a game, or it just, yeah, it's the same thing for 20 years. But I guess at this point I must like it or I would have stopped doing it by now. Or I'm addicted. One of the two.
I think in-game is something that you guys were a little slower to get in on. I know Ron has some questions on the in-game. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Well, it's really interesting because that's the market that's evolved. Something that I'm going to be personally looking into more. 2 years ago, it was a fad. Last year, it got more into it. And I have a feeling some of the pros are waiting till the game starts and betting. And then you don't know on your side of the table where the edges are going to go or what they're going to do. How do you evolve with the fact that, at least from my end, it seems like in-game betting is becoming a lot more popular?
Yeah, I think that the public and the bettors are really kind of pushing it because it's especially like in sports like NBA, it's, if you have a number in mind and you want to lay, 2 and the game's painted 4 pre-game, most likely you're going to get your number if you just wait. And so I see a lot of that with a lot of the, there's 2 types of in-game bettors, I guess. The ones who are kind of sitting there in the beginning, first quarter, and saying, all right, I'm going to watch this for a few minutes and see if I can get my number. And then the other ones who are just evaluating the entire game and looking for value. I think some of the older school guys utilize it the way that I probably do, which is, I want to lay 2 in a game that's painted 4. But at Circa, I think we were smart enough to know what we're good at and what we're not. And we don't really claim to be in-game specialist or really have that entirely figured out, because I think it's hard to do without a high degree of automation and kind of, having those algorithms working. And at least not that you're blindly copying, what the computer's spitting out, but you need some guidance because it's just too quick. So we farmed out a lot of that to. Oh yeah, it's just we farmed out.
The algorithms are driving the in game, aren't the algorithms driving your number? Then you'd have to act real quickly to deviate from that.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously a certain skill set of guys who, your brain works fast, and obviously experience is going to help. The more times you've been in that situation and booked a game, your brain is going to kind of connect the dots and understand the situation. But it's also a debate of how much do you want to factor in your pregame position and where you stand into your number. Ideally, I mean, I guess
that's true.
Optimally you wouldn't, because it's not really relevant. But then again, it is, because you've got a boss who's on you and doesn't want, if you stand to lose 300,000 on the game and it's not my money, I have to take into account that if this outcome happens, I lose 300,000 and I can't just ignore it. So, but in an optimal world, you probably would ignore it because it's going to make you make decisions that are not, the best for the short term in terms of what you're doing, or I guess the long term. So yeah, it's definitely like a mix. That's why we farmed it out to Deck Prism, who I really trust with their numbers. And, I take all my cues from them. I mean, granted, we're definitely, inserting our bookmaking expertise in certain situations, but, I really like what they're doing. And I think the development and the work they put into it makes their product better and better every day. And so when we first started hanging their numbers, I think a lot of people were kind of taking us on and seeing differences in the market and trying to kind of exploit us. And now they've kind of realized, like, oh, wait, you guys' number is pretty good. And the Deck Prism number is pretty good. And so you got a little people who are leaving our number alone and betting the market to the Deck Prism number. And so, yeah, it's be interesting. I hope that, we keep kind of going along and it gets even better. And maybe at some point we can contribute more as Circa to kind of the growth of in-game in terms of like our input into it. Because right now I feel like it's the one thing that, besides menu size, we lack a little on menu size pregame, but it's kind of our 2 weaknesses, I'd say, that we're not kind of intimately involved with kind of the, putting all the things into what makes the product itself.
It seems like both sides seem like they can be exploited. I mean, recently, I think it became common knowledge among sharps that in-game was exploitable for a period of time, and there was nothing that they could do about it. And so the house was getting exploited that way because events had already happened. And then the players, we always feel like, what's the point if we're going to get spun and spun and spun? It's difficult to get these in-game plays in, and that's going to have to change down the line. But what I'd like to say is Circa has posted limits in their app, and that is just absolutely something that we love as a bettor, and you already know that. But what minimum guidelines do you think, aside from posting limits, do you think a book should have with transparency? What else should they be doing?
Yeah, I mean, limits are definitely one of the prominent ones, I guess. To me, I don't know how a sports book would ever expect to retain serious customers without posting the limits, because I always had this conversation with one of our bigger bettors, and he's basically saying, like, Matt, when you tell me a number, what I appreciate is you always stick to it and it never deviates. If you tell me 40K a game, I know I can get 40K a game no matter what, and I need that, and I can appreciate that entirely. I mean, most serious bettors have a unit size of a bet they need to get down on, and a lot of times when information hits the market, you're already working on your head. Okay, I can get 3 dimes down here, 2 dimes down here, 6 dimes here. You need to be able to know what each book is going to take and count on them, and that's how they provide value to you. And so, yeah, I a lot of times I'll have discussions with our guys who are doing risk in the back, and they're always they're kind of frustrated because we'll be sitting there and we'll get hit on one bet, by 3 different guys at the same time. They'll all take plus 10 at the same time. And they're discouraged because they're like, oh, well, that's because this just came out. So-and-so's out for, the Colts. And, I'm telling them, guys, this is more of a compliment to our consistency and how we do business, because these guys all know that Circa is such a solid out that they can go there, they can hit our number on an injury, and we're not going to look at them like they're stealing from us. We're just going to look at like, nice bet. And so I think they're slowly getting that and understanding why that happens, and because we're just a trusted out, so we get that action. It's hard for me to answer in terms of what other books need to provide. I mean, to me, every day you open up the doors, you're telling people who you are, and you're announcing that by your practices and how you do business and how you treat your customers. And so, you can build a brand however you want to build it. If you want to have a sports book that's known for tossing winners, then you can do that. No one's there to stop you. And I'm not going to say it's even right or wrong. It's a free market, and unless they make it illegal to bar winners, like, you can do it. But you're sending a message as to what kind of book you're running and who you are as a bookmaker. And I'm just trying to run the book that I would feel good about betting at if I was a customer. And that's kind of the guidance I give the guys when they're setting limits, when they're making any decision. Like, pretend that you're the customer, pretend that you're walking into Circa Sports for the first time and you've heard all this stuff about how great Circa is, whatever. Like, are we living up to, what would be in your mind of what Circa Sports should be? And if we're not, like, just do the right thing. And so,
before Ron asks his question, I want to just comment that Vegas has changed, where you're running into a lot of customer service and a lot of employees that had their hands out, and they're just transparent about not being sincere. And I can tell you, honestly, when you talk to a Circa employee, anywhere in the sports book and actually in the casino itself, they are genuinely out to help you. They are just good people, a different type of people. And sorry to interrupt your question, Ron, but just wanted to make that comment.
I mean, and that's why, during this 2.5 years that we haven't been able to travel as much, I really looking forward to seeing what Circa looks like, and I'll be there next month. Matt, you've been on both sides of the fence, so to speak. So you've seen all the kinds of mistakes that people can make. Could you share like what some of the common mistakes you see bettors, not necessarily sharp bettors, but it could be sharp or recreational bettors. What mistakes are they making?
I don't common like recreational bettors, like, it's hard for me to say what mistakes they're making. I think they're just thinking of things differently, and this has probably been covered before, but they're thinking in terms of, not numbers. They're thinking in terms of which team they think will win the game, or narratives. And, if you're not attaching a price to something, then it's, you're not really thinking about it correctly. So if you're making a bet based on the fact that you think the Colts are the better team, that's kind of irrelevant unless you can tell me how much better the Colts are and at what number you think they should be rated. And so I get into this a lot of times with, it's kind of how you can tell good odds makers, or if somebody gets the odds making part of it pretty quickly, because, as a bookmaker, all I want to do is understand, if you know a lot about this sport, tell me what the price should be, and then I can work with that. But, if you're just going to tell me all the angles and, well, this team's really good at this and this team's really bad at this, and when they play this, it's like, I kind of really don't care. Just, I respect your opinion. You know what you're talking about. Give me a number. Like that's what I need. I need a number. And so I think the public would probably benefit by thinking of things more in terms of there is no right side. There's a right number for each side. And obviously this has been said a million times, and this is the difference between, pros and recreational bettors. And so, yeah, that's probably my
that's
number.
That's an outstanding point, and I agree with you, because if you're going to buy this beautiful dress and it's worth $100, is it worth $200 or something? If you're going to buy this Colt team at -7, are they worth it at -10 or something, or even 7.5?
The better thing for me to critique would be bookmakers, because I have a real issue with how most bookmakers think, because I think most of the old school legendary bookmakers, like Nick Bogdanovich, Richie Bachelleri, all the offshore guys get this, but you really have to, the way you win at bookmaking is writing bets. And so, I can't stress this enough. It's just, everyone is just so scared to write a bet that they perceive could be a winning bet. And in the end, it doesn't really matter. The way that, when we get buried on a side, the way we're going to get out is by writing more bets. When your future book looks like crap and all your positions suck, the way you're going to get good is write more bets, raise the limits. I'm not saying to be reckless with it, but it's that thing where usually the path that kind of has the obstacles is the way. And that's how it is with bookmaking. It's scarier to push forward and write bigger bets and keep writing when you're in a position where you're not looking great, but that's the only way out. That's the only way to get where you need to be.
I made an egregious error and didn't even create a banner for this, but it's very important for people to understand hold percentage in these future markets. And you guys are, blazing the trail forward and throwing it in the faces of competitors of how low your percentage hold on futures are. Can you kind of explain that in layman's term on why your customers should be coming to you for futures, and explain to them the whole hold percentage differences that you're going to find at Circa versus Joe Blow Sportsbook?
Well, I laugh at this because every time I talk about hold percentage, Richie Bachelleri says theoretical hold percentage, and he's right. It's
right.
It's a number that we theoretically would hold writing a certain amount of bets. It goes back to my theories on bookmaking, which is volume is going to always trump all. And so in my head, when we opened Circa Sports, I was like, all right, we can open, let's say a golf pool to win the British Open. We can open a traditional hold, which is roughly 30 to 35%. And, we can expect to write some money, but nothing special. But, we were looking to pretty much set ourselves apart. So my thought was, we lower the hold, we'll get some right off the bat from people who are price sensitive. And then we kind of realized, we're really, the people who really know in Las Vegas, and Las Vegas is an educated market to this point that, most sports bettors in Las Vegas, they know how to price shop to some degree. And so we were getting a lot of play based on that. So we kind of just kept playing with the hold and lowering it. And we found that it really was helping our results, because in the end, it's like, all right, you can write $5,000 into a pool and make, I don't know, $1,000 if you're holding 20%. Or we can write 50,000 into a pool, and hold 10% and make $5,000. And it's like, the volume takes over. So in doing that and lowering that hold, it makes we make ourselves have to book to a certain number. And so let's say it's 15% for the British Open. If one guy goes down, Jeff Davis booking that has to raise somebody else to offset that. So you just put yourself in a spot where decisions have to be made by the bookmaker, and value is inevitable. It's just, you're creating action, you're creating bets, and it gives the customer a reason to keep checking back in, because, if we take a lot of Rory bets at 10-1, we move him down to 8, that's a big chunk of our hold percentage there. We need to move a lot of people up. And so it just happens.
And what you're not really mentioning is that these hold percentages that you're doing in the various sports are literally half the hold, or even a quarter of what some of these places are holding. I mean, you can go to these other books and you're giving 20-1, and the other place is giving 6-1. It's just preposterous.
Yeah, and I don't like to compare ourselves to some of these other books, because it's such apples and oranges. To me, if you know what you're doing, you're never getting too out of whack on the hold percentage, because it's just discourages right. The other thing I will say though, the yes nos are great for the hold percentage for protecting the customer. A lot of times they'll come in and our guys have like a 4-way or a 5-way future book pool or something, and they might put like a 12% hold on it, which is way too high. And we'll come in there, and because they're doing that, somebody will just bet us the nose across the board, and I'll be like, "You got your hand slapped." I'm like, "You can't hold 12% on a 4 or 5 person pool. That's ridiculous. Like, you should be at 8% tops." And so the no pricing for the customer, it protects them, and so I really like that aspect of it. And I'm different when it comes to that stuff. It's like I'll root against our guys sometimes to get their hand slapped because I'm just so pro customer that I'm just like laughing at them. I'm like, well, you deserved it. Like
that's another thing I failed to mention that I love is having a no available. To me, it still seems a little wide sometimes to me, but I'm a greedy bettor. But I definitely really appreciate that there's a yes/no market, and every book should have yes/no markets. That's why their futures pay so little. If they had to offer both sides, then it tightens things up. Ron has an unknown question. I have no idea what he's going to ask.
Okay.
The wild card.
A wild card question. I do want to say that Chris took the words out of my mouth with the yes/no. It's unbelievable. So I intentionally held this question back from Chris because here's my question. I'm going to kind of read it. Chris walks into your shop on Monday morning. He makes 5 pretty sizable NFL wagers. So the 2 questions I have here is, because it's Chris, how do you react to what he plays? And also, if he made those plays on a Monday, or let's say he made these plays on a Sunday with the same information, no new injury concerns and whatever, does it matter to you when he makes those plays? Not only who he is, but when he makes them.
It sure does. If I bet early, and that's one of the issues that I have is that, boy, this is multi-layered, but
that's why I want to hear it from both sides.
Yeah,
right.
This is a back and forth because there are times that I can't bet at Circa because it's going to move the whole screen. So, and that ties into the later question that I had with you is do you worry about moving markets? Do you worry about the pump fakes at the beginning of the week? Do you track the people that are kind of moving lines early in the week to where it turned out to be a pump fake and you just ended up doing them a favor by moving the market and as an overall? But getting back to me, I have to avoid betting with you guys sometimes because I can't move the market because I need to, for whatever reasons that I have. And so there's times I'm actually avoiding betting at Circa. So do you have any concerns with that issue when you're moving lines every time sharps bet? So there's 2 questions in there for you.
Yeah. And it's kind of a predicament. I mean, the first question, to address how I would treat Chris's bets, when they come in Monday and our limits, let's say 10,000, if Chris is betting a half limit play or a full limit play, yeah, I'm going to respect those bets a great deal because I know he's a proven winner and I know he's somebody who, his opinion matters in the marketplace, and I respect the work he puts in. So yeah, I'll probably make a very aggressive move on a Monday. If he's betting the day of the game on Sunday, then it's just going to come down to probably how much he's betting. And so if our limit's 100,000, honestly, it would probably take a $20,000 bet for me to look at it on a Sunday. Unless it was an injury game. But then again, our limit would probably be lower on that game. So yeah, it's totally different. It's, when we open the college football line, the first in the world on Sunday at 11, I'm making aggressive moves because I'm in full on price discovery mode, which I would still say for NFL on Monday is probably still price discovery mode. So, the moves are much more aggressive. And that's why the more we feel like the window is tighter on a given game and, on a number, the more we increase the limit and the less we react to plays that aren't full limit bets. And it's interesting because a lot of times I respect the information from the guys who bet early in the week more than the guys who bet on Sunday because I know they win at a higher clip. But then again, come Sunday, everything's kind of out there, so it's hard for me to react the same to it. The second question was, remind me what the second question was.
The pump fakes. Are you tracking people that seem to be using you to move the lines?
Yeah, and so this is something I really struggle with because I want to be when I give people, if somebody's betting their own stuff, and I'm trying to help them get down, there will be times when I'll extend limits to sharp players who I know don't have a big impact on the market and they're trying to get down large bets. I'll give them bigger than our limits, and it's a double-edged sword because I don't want to blow up their number. I don't want to make them not bet with me. But at the same time, I have to do what's best to protect my position. And so if they bet a side that is pretty obvious to me and I can understand it, and I know, okay, they're betting this because of this injury and there's 2 offensive linemen out, I get it. Okay. That number is probably not going to come back. And I probably can't just sit on the money and only move it a half point. So in those situations, I kind of got to move it aggressively. And I feel a tremendous amount of guilt when I move a number on an originator aggressively, because I feel like I'm hurting them and lowering their, lowering their amount, taking it down. So I want to be known as a book eventually where you can get down quietly and not feel like your position is going to be blown up to the world. But I really think it's more of a comment on how hard it is to get down in the rest of the market and in other books, that we have to move this aggressively and that you're not scared, that you're hesitant to bet with us because it's no one else. There's not enough books doing it this way. If there were and they were taking fair limits, you wouldn't have to be so worried about compromising your position to us. And then, we have the reputation as the one book that kind of takes all the sharp action. So when we move, everybody pays attention. So I think it's a comment on the industry as a whole, how not enough people are doing it the right way, more than it is us kind of blowing up numbers, because we're just kind of doing what we have to do. So my thought is, as we get bigger and have more volume, I won't have to move numbers as aggressively, and you might be safe to bet into us on a Monday without kind of exposing your position too much.
Yes, no question before Ron answers or asks his question. Do you worry that because you're a market leader, if you've got those rogue lines, that you're actually pushing bettors away a little bit? They're going to look at it and say, whoa, Circa's at this number.
I don't know if I worry about that. I think I take more joy in that than worrying in that. I mean, I'll come through, and if you watch my college football lines during the summer, I might read for a couple days and readjust to my power ratings, then come in and just move everything 2 points. And I think it's weird that the whole market kind of adjusts to that, and that, the guys playing these middles and these arbs on college football numbers 2 months out are not betting a lot of money. I mean, we take, I think 3 or 5, I think we take 5,000 or 3,000, one of the two, 5,000. But the other books, I think you're only taking 1,000 or 2,000. So you'll see, like, I'll move a number off 2 points. Somebody hits me for 1,000. Somebody hits me for 2,000. I move it back a half point. But the whole market kind of drifts to our number. But I like to move numbers around because it creates action. So honestly, it's more of a function of me just getting bored. And I don't mind putting numbers out there, because I just think to some degree it like just keeps everybody on their toes and it makes things more exciting.
I'm sorry, Ren, I got to segue quickly. There's a prominent offshore book that moves their numbers up and down on every game as often as they can. They just change the juice. Do you guys ever get to the point of thinking that on dead days where not a lot of action is pouring in, that you just start moving numbers and moving juice a little bit to inspire some action?
I do that, but when I do that, people get mad at me, I think, because I come in and I don't give a lot of context and I want to see some bets. And I'm not the primary manager of really any of these markets, except for on college football on Saturdays. Mondays and Saturdays, I pretty much book the college football exclusively. But any other day, I'll come in and I'll move a whole lot of numbers around. And I think I did an NBA one time. I think I pissed somebody off. And I think when people are managing a market and they are where they want to be, they don't like somebody coming in and just moving numbers around. So I like that, because I agree with you. Like, if nobody's betting and I'm not seeing action,
move the line.
It doesn't make any sense to me why you wouldn't. I mean, to get a reaction, you have to create action and you kind of move the number around, see if somebody bets there. You can always go back. And to me, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to write business. And so I think it's devolved in this thing where people sit there and they feel great. Okay, I haven't moved a number in 2 hours. My lines must be great. And Jimmy Vaccaro is always the one I credit with it. He always says that if nobody's betting it, it's a bad number. And so I 100% subscribe to his theory on that. He's 100% right.
Ron, go ahead. Sorry for muting you so long.
Well, my takeaway to that point is that then the people who do their numbers, I might do my numbers and so on. If they're sitting on a number that you like, the idea is bet early in the week, because that number is going to be gone. The number is going to be adjusted. It's going to be into the market. So if you like a number, don't wait.
Well, and the thing I would say too, I'm going to contradict myself, is that I move numbers a lot early in the week because I want to get information cheaply. And so when our limit's 3,000 or 5,000 in college football, I'm moving them all the time. I mean, I can think of games where I've gone from 4 to 7 on air because I'm like, all right, if nobody's laying 4, let me see if they'll take 7. And granted, a lot of times it's just an arb bet, but like, it helps me. I can't start booking a game until I have some money there. Once I have some money at a number, then I can start thinking about it. So that's kind of my thought.
Makes sense from both sides, but it just speaks so much to, if you trust your numbers, go for it.
The other thing I'll say is, and again, this is more of a contradiction, but good bookmakers don't move their number a lot when they're not doing what I'm talking about. So like when you get to a Saturday, the day of college football games, a lot of more what I think are amateur bookmakers will want to just like, oh, $2,000 bet here, move it a little, $3,000 bet here, move it a little. Like once you get to the point where the limits are big, you don't really want to be moving that number unless somebody tells you you need to move this number. And that to me is a limit bet. And so, I get on our guys, like, don't micromanage these games when we're to the day of the game, Saturday, and the limits are at full peak, because you're going to get cute and you're going to move a line a half point for 3 dimes, another half point for 2 dimes, and then 5 dimes, you move a half, and then somebody comes back and blasts you for 100,000. You're going to feel like an idiot. So, you have to move for a reason. The higher the limits get, but early in the week, play with the numbers, move it all you want, find out information, get it cheap.
Yeah, it's funny because I see a lot of steam on Saturday mornings, college football, and you wonder what's coming. And I think it's just one book moving and everybody following, and then it becomes an avalanche.
Well, I can tell you what it is. There's groups that wait till Saturday to bet because they need the higher limits. And so I have a group that waits for me and plays, and they bet big, and I give them big bets. And so, you have to, a lot of times they'll lay a number like 14. And I know, like, if I go 15, that's a dead number. Nothing's going to, I need to make a substantial move, because this number is going to move 2 points based on their opinion, because that's just, they have enough respect. And so when I take their bets, I move them aggressively. But you're right. It's painted 14 and they see Circa go to 16, and it's self-fulfilling. They just market painted 16. And so I don't look at any other books, honestly, when I'm booking on Saturdays, because we're seeing, to me, most of the sharp action. I just book to how I think, I'm booking to what I think the number is going to close and where I think it's going. So if somebody lays 14 and I understand why they laid 14, and I now in my head adjust my power ratings kind of on the fly there and go, okay, if it ain't 14, I can see 17. I'll make a 14 to 17 point move. I don't worry about getting middle too much, because I'm just trying to get to the right number. And a lot of times all it takes is one bet for me to, like, and I don't think I'd be able to do this if I didn't have my own power ratings and have kind of my own thoughts. But I can understand most of the bets, and then a lot of times I'll make aggressive moves just because I'm like, all right, yeah, I can see that. So
I know that you aren't as efficient with the NFL that Bennett handles that, I believe, but have you noticed that the betting groups over Warren Sharp and I were talking, and Ron were talking about this last week?
Yeah,
it seems like betting groups have started to come in at like some really odd times where they could have had better numbers, and it's just strange. Have you guys noticed that at all?
Yeah. So a lot of the big groups play very late with us. And they don't appear to really like you're saying, they'll take a number that I don't really perceive as value based on where the number's been all week.
Yeah.
But it seems like they're willing to sacrifice a little bit of line value basically just to get volume. And they just want to get down a certain amount of money, which brings me back to my point that I think, there's a lot of these sports where, and I understand these are betting groups that are expecting to win money, but they also, they want to get down enough money where all their partners feel like they have enough of a gamble. And professional bettors do like to gamble for the most part. And, it's kind of counterintuitive, but like, a lot of our business, I think, that we write on UFC is just because it's the summer and it's slow, and, people want to take positions that they think are profitable. But I don't think a lot of these guys betting UFC with us, are sitting here thinking they're going to, hit, 10% ROI. I think a lot of them are just happy to have some action and something to do during the summer when it's slow, and maybe return a couple percentage points. And, if things don't work out, maybe they'll break even, lose 1%. But I just think there's not a lot of need to be scared of these big liquid markets. And UFC is one where
that's the last. I consider that the Wild West. That's the last remaining inefficient market that anything can happen.
It's inefficient, I agree, but there's so much liquidity. So you can, as a bookmaker, you can really write to it. I mean, I think we're going to raise our limits on it starting next week, because I'm just so impressed with the two-way right that I see on these fights. And it's just, it's really great. I mean, I would put it up there against her, like almost, any big sport, NFL, college football, in terms of just the interest and the diversity of opinions. And, it's a great sport to be a bookmaker and a bettor in. So
I think it is. Ron, go ahead.
Okay. Well, I got a million questions now, but I got a couple in the softer markets, the markets that I deal with, because the NFL line fight, everybody knows it. The information is out, the internet and so on. So I'm into the season win totals and the player props. So a question for each. On the season win totals, And I guess you probably answered it a little bit because you yourself move lines a little faster and a little more extreme than other places. But for season win totals, do you move them fast? Do you have a different methodology when you move your season win totals?
So me and I can speak to college football wins because we've been working on those, and I've done a little more work on those. But I'm constantly adjusting those based on my power rating tweaks. The thing I've learned with the season win totals is the second you read something, move the line, because the odds that somebody else is reading that at the same time you read it are very high. And no matter how inconsequential or small you think it is, if I don't move it, I'll see the bet the next day. It's crazy. I mean, I think about a month ago, I read an article in Arizona State, and it was just talking about how the coaching turmoil and all this stuff and how this is going to be such a challenge this season. And I didn't move it. And I'm just like, all right, I'll move it tomorrow. And then somebody texted me like literally that night and like, limit bet Arizona State under. I'm just like laughing at it. So, and like you said, you can't be afraid to move aggressively. And a lot of these times, I'm trying to think of the teams. Somebody bet Texas Tech over with me the other day, and that bet made sense to me. I think they have the new coaching staff, and they had Western Kentucky's offensive coordinator, who I think was at Houston Baptist before that. And so I expect big things out of their offense potentially. So when I understand the bet, I think the guy who bet it took like 5.5 over plus money. I think I made, I don't know, a 40 or a 50-cent move just because the bet made sense to me. And so that to me is season wins moving. Like you would never do that. You would never move something 50 cents for the most part in a more, less volatile market. But if you can understand the bet in a niche market, you kind of have to make aggressive moves. And my team is very, they're very like, I don't want to say analytical. They're very fundamentally sound bookmakers, and they don't ever want to scalp themselves or put themselves in a position where they're not earning. But when it gets to these smaller markets, I think the good bookmakers, which I count everyone on my team as a good bookmaker, they know, okay, let's set aside that earning principle and let's move this aggressively because this number has a lot more room to run. I mean, this number could close 6.5 over 80. So what's the point of moving this 15 cents? We need to kind of, you need to know your player, but you also need to know the situation. And, if you understand the bet, move aggressive.
So my note to self is I should come into Circa on Monday morning, Tuesday morning, Wednesday morning, Thursday morning, and Friday morning. So I might see 5 different lines.
Yeah, no, I mean, yes.
Yeah.
and with the futures, you really will. I mean, if you check our app on the golf betting, you will see, if you're not, it's almost like the NBA in-game betting. If you don't see your price to start, you'll get it at some point because we just move the numbers around so much.
Hang on and make. So let me go on to props. So somebody like me, I've learned my lesson. Chris knows this over years in terms. NFL, I might bet three games, but I'm going to bet 50 player props. And that gets you in trouble. I mean, I know you guys don't do limiting and stuff like that, but the places I've dealt with have limited me and said, no, you're not going to bet these or whatever. How do you treat the players who are winning on props and betting predominantly props?
Well,
I know it's a smaller market, but yeah.
Well, I was going to say with us, like I said before, we know kind of what we're good at and what we're not. And it's not that we don't, Chris Bennett is one of the best NFL prop makers as an odds maker, out there. I mean, I think him and Ed Salmons at the Westgate are the two best guys that I've ever come in contact with in terms of making props. But because we're so tied up day to day in bookmaking and taking these big bets, we kind of chose not to hang as many props as we normally do, or as some other books, because we just couldn't offer the Circa level of limit. And so we hope to get there eventually, but I don't mind. We have players that come in and bet our props that we do hang. And, we move aggressively to the person. If this is of somebody we know who's a winner, we move it as aggressively as we can to try to find two-way action. But I don't ever for 1 second, hold it against anybody or think of limiting people based on that, because that's just not our model. But I've dealt with what you're dealing with, where I've seen, books that if you don't bet some other sports to them that are a little less likely for you to return a high percentage, they're probably not going to be too happy with your action. So that's just
it's
kind of
like the scroll has that Chris has at the bottom, NFL draft wide book, and I can't help myself, but 3 straight years after the draft, I got limited immediately because I write about the draft. I publish stuff about the draft, and I can't help myself. I said, this number is out of whack. This number is out of whack.
Well, if you're a bookmaker who isn't really an odds maker, and you don't make your own prices, in their mind, I mean, I'm thinking they probably don't feel like they have any other line of defense besides limiting you, because they're copying their odds off somebody else. So unless that person gets better, What are they, they have no control, which is why I like to, we don't like to hang a lot of stuff on our board that we don't have thought behind, or that we don't have somebody who knows, about the pricing, because you just feel so helpless when somebody comes in and just bets these numbers. And if you didn't know, having a sense of where they should be, you just feel like, wow, this number could be, if you're betting over 6.5 on a draft prop, I mean, what's to say the number's not 12.5? And the guy just copying the offshore line doesn't know that or have any feel for that. So,
well, you guys did the kind of ride the middle routine. Like for me, I wouldn't even book the stuff because it's all information based. But you guys did the smart thing. Other places had these props out, a couple of weeks ahead of time, and you chose to release on Monday, which was kind of a compromise, and you kind of stuck to the mainstream stuff, and the limit was high enough where you weren't going to get murdered. I think you broke about even on it. I thought it was released, but it's not something I would want to book. It's any information only market like these drafts have got to be very frustrating for you guys.
You said it the right way. We rode the middle, and I hated every second of it. I think 2 years ago we went all in, and we opened up, all these props, and I was cool. I'm cool losing if we originate and we get some press out of it, and we we really go all in. And this year I was adamant. I'm like, screw the NFL draft. We are not booking this. I'm like, I said something to Derek. I'm like, hey, Derek, are you cool if I don't book this? And he was cool with it. And then Jeff Benson played it back at me. He's like, what would you expect from Circa? Would you walk into Circa and expect that they would not have NFL draft betting? And I was like, oh God, you're right. I'm like, fine, all right. So I'm like, let's do 32 player propositions, because I like the player proposition or the draft positions. I think those are fun props, and they're kind of finding a market. And I said, all right, we'll take a dime, maybe 2 dimes the day of. But yeah, I agree with you. It's funny. I like price discovery markets, but there's so much work. You just have to be ready to do them. And so the year of the pandemic, or whenever that draft was, that we had more time to put into it, it was okay. But if we're busy, it's just hard to do it, and it's such a commitment.
Yeah.
But in theory, like I don't mind information markets. We put out the prop, like, Will Tiger, I think, what was it? Will Tiger playing the Masters when that was being debated, and we swung $6 each way on that prop. I think we were at no $6, yes $10, and that's fun. I mean, you're probably going to lose when you're booking something like that, but I don't mind it. It's good practice. But I hate being in the middle. That's what I would put out there. Like, I don't really like what we did. So next year we'll either do a lot or we'll do nothing. So